gets a goal? Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello. So after a rare weekend where I actually got pissed off by fantasy bloody football, here we are to talk about the infernal game we all secretly love and hate at the very same time. I'm not alone in that, am I, this week, Sam? Yes, in starting brilliantly but ending abruptly, my triple captaincy mirrored my bedroom activities, abilities these days, sadly, over the course of the weekend in a game week which promised much but has delivered very little, again, mirroring my bedroom activities. Speaking of mirrors, though, here I am, hoping yet again to leave that in the past and help me do so. I'm joined by Sam to talk it through and I suppose commiserate and despair that we both have a moment with FPL a little bit. You're all right, mate, other than that.
Yeah, life is good. FPL is not. This weekend was particularly poor, I would say, but the season so far has also just been a complete train wreck from top to bottom for me so far. And I think looking at the community on Twitter as well, quite a lot of people are in a similar boat as well. So hopefully if that it describes you so far, today will be consolation and maybe some sort of advice on what to do from this point on. But yeah, yesterday I was feeling pretty low about FPL. I'm still not feeling great, but 24 hours has passed and a bit of perspective is obviously required because it is a game at the end of the day. It doesn't help that my team are bottom of the league with 1 point after 9 games though. So the less said about that, the better. In the meantime, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pods, we'll of course be looking at the team updates. You might have guessed that Tom wasn't particularly happy on Saturday and neither of us were happy at all come the end of Sunday. We'll talk a little bit about where we are in the season, what's not going as we think it should and how we're planning to sort it out. And then linked to that, following a good question we received last week from a listener in FPL JMO, we're delving into squad dynamics this year and our plans in particular, taking me into a really interesting territory that we'll dig into, of course. We'll also be chatting a bit about Man United. Obviously, now Ten Hag got sacked today. What impact could this have on FPL? We'll be analysing that later on in the show. And of course, the game week preview is back yet again, including a bit of Calvert-Lewin lamenting in best transfers, best captaincy, and another point has been scored in the bold claims, hasn't it, Tom? So Monday, the 27th of October, all the games have been played. The arrows are very red, particularly for me, I think. In the meantime, though, shall we have a look at the game week reviews, Tom?
Yeah, it's 28th. I've just realised I misprinted your running.
Oh, sorry, my bad, my bad.
Never mind. Who cares about that one?
Never read off the script.
No, never read off the script. Okay, so game week reviews. So yes, not the best week for me. A 57 all out, and yeah, the story really was that I played a triple captain as per last week's discussion. And yeah, 2.33 individual XG for Erling Haaland, 1 goal after 5 minutes, and that's all she wrote. I don't know. Like I got annoyed, and obviously you guys have all heard me talk about being serene about FPL and being quite detached from it. But I think when you play a chip, you do, I suppose, get more emotionally invested against your better sort of judgment or intent. And I was really quite grumpy on Saturday afternoon. But yeah, I told you, Sam, I was just like, oh God, I very rarely get grumpy about it. But I just put my phone down. You gave us good advice as well, which I then went and followed, which was obviously to do the right thing, post a bit of a jokey tweet and put my phone down for the rest of the evening, basically. I had no players in Everton, Fulham. And, I made dinner for my daughter, spent time with her. And once the sort of, the negative emotion had sort of dissipated a little bit, I did what I always do and reminded myself if this is the biggest thing I'm upset about, I'm a very lucky man. So, and that's what anyone should do in this sort of situation. But yeah, it wasn't the best week, really. I mean, I played Raya, Gabriel, and Trent all in the same game. Wasn't expecting much from that, but obviously Gabriel being subbed off in the 53rd minute was obviously a bit of a sucker punch at the end of the week. And Haaland, obviously 18 points to triple captain. It's not a blank, but you spoke about your Sadio Mane experience last pod. So it's not terrible, but obviously it's not great, especially knowing that people have hat-trick in the pocket from early on in the season. Rico Lewis with a clean sheet. Boomo with a 15-pointer. Well done, James from Planet. 10 points from Cole Palmer, which was obviously very nice. Him to come through. Bought in Garnacho for Semenyo, as I trailed last week. Scored, hit the bar. Had a couple of good. I think he had one good opportunity at least in the first half. Remains to be seen whether the new United manager is actually going to trust in him. We have to see. I was told by a United fan on earlier on online that only Ten Hag will be playing Garnacho, so it could be quite fun again. But yeah, I mean, I was really quite annoyed about obviously just the way that the outcomes lay, because at the end of the day, the underlying data shows it's a good decision, but the outcomes kind of would paint that as a bad decision in terms of just how it went. So, there's a comfort blanket, obviously, that it was a ridiculously high XG, so 3 big chances missed in analog terms, 2.33 XGI, like just ridiculous stuff, really. And yeah, I can't be too upset, I suppose, in some ways, because the player did what I wanted him to do. He just didn't get the ball in the back of the net. And there were a couple of occasions I didn't watch the highlights, but I was watching. I was obviously kind of cognizant of the misses from following along online. And I was just like, yeah, there's no way I'm watching Match Day this week. It's going to upset me a lot. So yeah, down from 400-ish K to 600-ish K. I mean, it is what it is. I don't know whether I rip everything up this week or whether I just kind of hold fire for a week and just kind of let it all sink in. But we'll talk about that during the scope of this pod. It feels a bit rich, actually, for me to be complaining too much, because Sam, you have had a similar experience this week without the triple captain, but quite a lot of negativity as well surrounding how you've been doing.
Right, pricey right run coming up. 45 points. 45 points.
Yeah, okay. I take it all back.
Yeah. Just for clarity, Tom, in case you need a reminder, got 57. Yeah, triple captain fair. 45. I didn't have Saka, Salah, or Palmer. All, of course, got relatively big hauls. My differential in Foden has done nothing, despite having a good game against Southampton. If Haaland had his shooting boots on, Foden could have easily hauled himself through assists. It all got off to a relatively good start. I think the Man City and the Brentford games came in fairly early, obviously. I got returns from Lewis and something from Haaland, didn't triple captain, so that felt okay. Obviously against my own club as well, so I was happy enough to not see us concede 5-6 goals from a personal point of view. And then obviously Mbeumo getting 2 goals, including one at the death. I thought, okay, I'm actually finally getting some luck here. And the Sunday was about as bad a day in FPL as I can really remember. I think the only worst time I can remember in my entire history of FPL was last year live on the pod when Udogie got sent off. And that was just horrific.
Yeah.
But just blanks everywhere. Triple Spurs against what is one of the struggling teams in the Premier League, Crystal Palace, and got nothing out of it. Spurs stunk up the pitch that game as well. It was their worst performance all season. Solanke has now had 3 games in a row of almost 0 XG after having incredible data when I bought him in on the wild card. So I don't know what the hell I've done to him, but I've broken him. Very similar story for Calvert-Lewin. Absolutely nothing since I wildcarded him in. Now, I am feeling a little bit like Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar, just banging on the library, the bookcase, just screaming at my past self, like, what the hell are you doing? You're buying Calvert-Lewin on a wildcard. This is ridiculous. And yeah, obviously being punished duly. But he had good data until now. I think he's just played so poorly that I'm even worried he's going to even start next game week against Southampton. So the good fixture that I was kind of holding on to him for, I'm actually worried he even gets the game. Rodgers hooked before the 60th minute, looked a bit tired. Hopefully that's not a long-term problem, but obviously not ideal. And Arsenal double clean sheet wipeout. Gabriel goes off injured. Raya gets yellow card for time wasting and then concedes the second goal to Salah, whose EO absolutely crucifies me yet again. So not a great week. I did use 1 free transfer to get rid of Son, who didn't start. So that's something, to bring in Johnson, who did nothing. But that has given me the money to make one particular move this week, which hopefully gets me back on the front foot a little bit. But overall, 2.7 million. I'm extremely worried about my team makeup generally. To be 3 or 4 weeks after a wildcard and be this concerned about so many different players is really worrying. And I've only got one free transfer as well. So there's a decent chance that hits are coming just to try and right the ship. Because mistakes have been made. The triple swap I made the other week has not paid off. The risks that I took, Son and Foden, just hasn't worked, and it's gotten me further away from the team that I'd want by, say, game week 12. So yeah, overall, mistakes definitely made, need to correct them ASAP, and I've been punished for it as well. So 2.7 million, gotta switch it up quickly.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think I was just saying to James in the chat that like I think expend, especially if you're not doing very well, you expend so much nervous energy during the course of the game week, don't you? And that can in some ways be the conduit for why you can have a bit of an FPL low, as it were, especially if you kind of work yourself up into thinking, oh, I really like my team this week. Like you, for example, having Foden at home Southampton.
On paper, great.
On paper, your team was fantastic. And it's just, you've got a myriad of different reasons which have all kind of come together to conspire to get you down the doldrums effectively. And I think that's kind of the first point that we're going to speak about a little bit, just to pivot on from that a little bit to just sort of the title of this pod, sort it out, lads. I mean, obviously, I was complaining a little bit on our Slack, and then a friend of the pods, Matt B&M, was just like, "Oh, I think you're very close to a complaining trophy here," because obviously he's in the millions, and he was just like, "Well, your triple captain did come off, and you're kind of 600-ish K. It's not that far from decency." So I was just like, "Well, I'm allowed a human response, but really, I want the points now. That's really that's all I want. That's all anybody wants." But I think it's definitely worth meditating on, really, because as you said, there are a lot of people in the same boat, and if you are doing very well, Brandon on Always Chief said he doffs his cap to those who are doing well. I have seen people kind of saying, "Oh, it's the year of the casual." I don't quite buy that. I just think that there's definitely kind of maybe a few things that we might want to think about a little bit more going forward, and you kind of started to touch on that a bit, Sam. So I mean, if you're looking at your performance thus far, what's your diagnosis? What's going wrong, do you think? Have you gone too far from the principles we spoke about at the start of the season in terms of how you're approaching the game? Is it all variance? I mean, what's your take?
I think it's always a mixture. So first of all, mistakes have definitely been made, but I think they've been exacerbated by other bits of misfortune as well. So for example, Son being injured this week was a bit of misfortune that sort of pushed me into a transfer that I wasn't planning on making. Saka the week before looking like a doubt as well, of course, felt like an opportunity that I wanted to take, didn't actually turn out being so. But I think whilst those are kind of unfortunate incidents that aren't necessarily mistakes, I think I've made them worse by pushing myself into a corner, getting rid of the free transfers and seeing them as opportunities when actually they might have just been things to swerve. So patience is required in certain aspects. So double Arsenal defence, I do still think eventually comes good. And again, little bits of misfortune will happen. Gabriel getting injured, Saliba getting the red card, blah, blah, blah. But I think patience is required in certain instances, whereas in other places, you need to very quickly be able to react to just genuine mistakes. So DCL, number one, is a big mistake. Solanke in a new system, even though the data was good, perhaps I should have waited a little bit longer before diving headfirst into that and gone with a player like you did, Watkins, for example, who has a much longer and proven track record with that team. And we knew with much more certainty that he was going to be a good pick. I think I took one too many chances on players that maybe I didn't have as much faith in as I should have done. And yeah, again, I've backed myself into a corner with a limited amount of free transfers by taking upside risks at a time when that probably wasn't really needed. And I've chased it too early. So yeah, Foden and Son, obviously problematic. I don't really mind the Porro thing so much, but obviously the result's not been great. I think I now need to try and take on board those lessons rather than just pivoting wildly throughout the season to try and almost, I guess, go on tilt to try and correct those mistakes. It's play the hand that you currently have and figure out what is genuinely best for my team at the moment, rather than, okay, these mistakes are made, correct them all at once for a -16 or something, just to say that they're done. Well, okay, but maybe that's not correcting for the future stuff. So yeah, calm is required, but there are definite mistakes that have been made along the way, alongside bits of misfortune. But hey, everyone gets misfortune. I can't blame that.
Yeah, I mean, we were saying before the pod that like sometimes when you have a bad week, it can be quite difficult to come on and do a pod. But in some
Mm.
ways, it's also quite cathartic, isn't it? Like you can have kind of that kind of cathartic release in FPL in a couple of ways. One way is exactly as you had described it, taking a massive hit, and that you can do that in the red mist. I'm sure we all did that in the early days, where you just take a massive hit, sort out everything's wrong, throw the rascals out and bring in what looks like to be the best team that you can possibly get for that week, and right the ship in that way, which can elicit massive positive dividends. I know that kind of, for example, FPL Raps has done that in the past. However, I do think that it is good to have that distance from it, have that moment where you kind of think about the principles that I guess drive how you are going to be playing the cards which are in front of you, rather than the cards you wish you had. And you do kind of have a few things, like you mentioned that you've already kind of made a transfer, which we've got into later, but those things all look quite good. And then I wouldn't say so much that the three free transfers that you made a few weeks ago were a mistake exactly. Like there was an opportunity there, it's just not worked out, and now it's about how you sort of react to that. It's a bit sort of like I suppose as well, potentially how we deal with kind of where we are now with our team. So one thing that I kind of jotted down to maybe think about was that we potentially, when we wildcarded in 6, and you said earlier on that you're not too far off a wild card. Neither of us too far away from when we actually did wild card, and we've got a few kind of glaring issues. And I do wonder whether there are a few things, like, for example, potentially assuming that the first 4 or 5 week patterns would continue. So double Arsenal defense looks like a great idea not very long ago, and now we're both looking at it thinking, oh, okay, we might be forced into a move anyway this week if Gabriel's out for a little while. But I mean, it's kind of crazy, isn't it, that you had Raya, for example, returning 20, 30 points over the first 4 weeks. And then what have we got since then?
Like
8
4
points.
points. Yeah, something crazy.
It's absolutely wild. And then a lot of the gains, I think, that have been made, and there is a sizable number of people on this, have been people who, over the last few weeks, so we've captained Haaland for the last 4 weeks in a row. Indeed, I triple captain, but just say you captain Haaland over the last 4 weeks, you've returned, 4, 8, 12, 24 points. So if you've been jostling around with your other captains, that's where the gain has been really against a lot of the time, as well as kind of the players like Salah who haven't owned, and Palmer who didn't own this week. I mean, these are players where everything's sort of mounting up, and I suppose how you plan to sort it out is a real problem, because you have that, as I said, that sort of instincts to just make huge moves, go balls to the wall. I said to you yesterday, oh yeah, I'm really considering now selling Haaland, buying Salah and just being done with it. But having that space and having that time to really think about it is also key, because you can just end up bugging yourself up even further, can't you? If you do make moves without really properly thinking them through. And even if, I don't know, I don't know how radical to go, is what I'm saying. I think that we're in slightly different positions, perhaps, because you've got a bit more of a hole that you're kind of trying to dig yourself out of than I do, and maybe that kind of does mean that the solutions are a little bit different. Just, do you know what I mean?
I do, although I think I probably said this in parts last season. I don't see it as a hole that you need to dig out of by playing any differently than perhaps you would have with smart FPL play at any other point. I don't think that just because I'm 60, 70 points behind you, I need to just go for radical upside picks, change my captaincy every week. I think that is basically just putting myself on a hiding to nowhere. And if anything, that's a lesson that I've learned in the last couple of weeks, where I pivoted. I tried to go too aggressive with Son and Foden. And if anything goes wrong with that, then you're even further behind, like I am now. So whilst there is upside potentially there, there's also the risk to make it much, much worse. And with still, in my mind, so early in the season that you can still make up this sort of gap, not easily, but with smart FPL play, let other people make the mistakes and just do what you think is going to genuinely score you the most points at this point in time. And I think that's fine. We have very different setups at the moment, so that releases different routes to us. And there's one particular route that I like the look of in my team that won't be available to a lot of others because I've made a lot of mistakes. But I think it's just playing the game as smartly as you can. When you see a differential and an upside pick that other people might be missing, then that's absolutely fair play. Completely go for it. But do weigh it up on merit and don't just do it because you're lagging far behind, because I think that's where even further problems can lie. And you can end up putting yourself in a position where you just can't get out of it anymore. And I fully intend on at least being in the chasing pack come the second half of the season when we get to the chip season. And okay, maybe in some double game weeks, I do take a couple of risks. And I'm sure between now and then, I will also have a punt on a differential that other people may be going for option A. I'll go for option B, but only if I think option B has a good chance of actually outscoring and beating that option A. I think it just opens up that pathway a little bit more for me. And I don't want to just pursue the daring and crazy option every week just for the sake of trying to claw back rank as quickly as possible. I'm happy enough clawing back 5 or 10 points every week slowly and letting other people make the mistakes ahead of me.
Yeah, I mean, I do see where you're coming from, and I do kind of think that you're mostly correct. And I think that there's definitely kind of loads of really good like examples of players doing exactly that. You know, just being in the doldrums, down in the millions, and then slowly over time, incrementally getting there. And hey, you know what, you kind of take your 80k at the end of the year like I did last year and just kind of write it off as a bit of a bad year. And I think the only kind of thing that I remember from the first 5 years of WTA was that I did exactly what you were saying, except without the smartness. You're a lot smarter than I am. And I think that there were some times when I wish I was a bit more bold with the captaincy or a bit more bold with the transfers I was making. And so yeah, it's balance, isn't it? You know, just I kind of I remember vividly saying to Nick, oh, you know, I'm going to put my template or armor on and buy all of these sort of, you know, the players who are in the zeitgeist and all this sort of thing, and didn't do anything for me really, because you know, I need to have those sort of big bang players. So I suppose it's considered risks a little bit, but considered risks in the context of every game week and going back to where you were before, like playing the hand that's in front of you. So, for example, this week, captaining Salah in your case would be an obvious thing to do, and I'm sure that that's exactly what you're thinking of doing. Those are the sorts of things, not buying in, you know, a left field pick and captaining them, but those little kind of things where you put yourself at risk a little bit of further decimation, because you haven't got a lot to lose and you've got a lot to gain. And when the calculus goes that way, then you can be a bit more sort of gung-ho, I suppose, or a bit more, you can allow yourself a little bit more leeway to make those sorts of considered calls, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, at the end of the day, I do have points to catch up on. So I do need to take those risks at some point. But calculated risks is the key. It's not just randomly chucking darts at a board and hoping that it comes up your way. Salah, for instance, this week makes a good option for me that a lot of people won't be able to get to. But that also comes at the cost of, okay, I'm going against Haaland, who will be popular. I won't have Palmer, perhaps I won't have Saka, also could haul, as we saw. So yeah, there's always going to be players I can't get to. Same with everyone. But in my position, there's, I guess, more danger that I get cast adrift if I just take silly gambles and I'm exposed to more of those players each week, because at the end of the day, those players that we've mentioned are the ones that are going to score 200 plus points across the season. And if I'm consistently gambling against them more often than not, I will end up on the losing side because they're just fantastic picks on penalties, 90-minute men, talismanic, great data. They're going to hurt me. It's now about trying to kind of game the system, look ahead and figure out where are the little patches that you can fight against one of these popular picks, go with an option B because you think that it's something that other people are missing out on. And I think this little patch now of the next 3 weeks with Salah could be one of those opportunities. Yes, he's fairly decently owned, but he's not like going to be 200% EO. So, and also I can get there without selling Haaland as well. So I can have both of them for the next 3 weeks if I want to. And hopefully that is a fairly good differential in of itself. Although I did see the above average FPL boys mentioning 43% of the top 100k have them both at the moment. So it's not quite the differential I want it to be. But again, I'll revert back to my original point. Smart FPL play at this point in the season is always going to come out on top. But do try and gain those edges where possible. If you think there's an option B that other people are overlooking, then take that extra effective ownership in your advantage and use it to try and bounce back where possible. But don't just do it for the sake of it because you're so far behind that you just need to take risks. It's a long season, and honestly, 50, 60 points can be made up in a couple of double game weeks if you play it right.
Yeah, to take him a long view effectively and trying to be calm.
Trying to.
Unsurprising outcomes here. I think it's good to maybe worth kind of thinking about how we kind of try to address this. And one angle to do that is through the thing that you mentioned about a good question from a listener. So listener FPL JMO, a really good bloke. I met him in person a few times. Had a good long chat at one of the old events we used to do. Fellow Saints fan Sam actually lives down there, I believe. Sent a long question last week, which we thought was really interesting and coincides nicely with a bit of planning, both our sides really, on squad dynamics and how we try to look at it. So a bit of a critical juncture at the moment with loads of teams out there. The old template potentially is crumbling, if there even was one. Like we've got 5-6 players different, and I look around kind of the FPL social sphere, and there are so many different kind of players who are out there right now. And yeah, I mean that kind of happened a little bit, I suppose, in terms of him asking this. So given our pricing structure has forced many of us to forego many premiums in order to create a balanced squad, and that points hauls have so far been spread amongst the premiums, spoken about that, having the big four effectively. Do we think we need to rethink strategy in terms of our team structure? James says his dad is sitting at a really good OR at the moment, and his team includes Haaland, Palmer, and Salah. So doing what you're doing, Sam, effectively, and having the sort of freemium model. He says he ignores premium defenders, his 2 cheap midfielders, and he kind of does it that way. So obviously the sort of idea of balance has been key in past seasons, and something that we've always sort of adhered to a little bit on this podcast. So judging by Nick, the father of the death of the third striker, which I adhere to, I haven't got a third striker at the moment. Have the big at the back. He was one who sort of pioneered that idea. But there are loads of sort of alternative routes and team structures, James says, which are viable and optimum. And there are lots of different ways that you can kind of play it in this particular season. He says obviously luck's a factor. So a couple of weeks ago, he said that his dad got Michael Keane off the bench as a sub for Conser, and obviously that propelled him to greater heights. But he says the TLDR, I feel like putting money into a balanced team means you can only have 1 or 2 premiums. Thereby, you're in danger of missing hauls and having them at the wrong time. So you're kind of covering yourself in a slightly different way. And maybe the new normal is to kind of just devastate the defenders we spoke about last week, and maybe go for reinvesting those funds going forward. So I did a little kind of comparison. If you're on YouTube, that's kind of on the screen, and I'm not going to read it all out. But I did a look at my team versus James's dad's team, which is very exciting. He's the man who doesn't listen to the pod, but it's still worth mentioning. But basically, I spend 3.1 million more on defenders, include that's goalkeepers and defenders, than he does. 36% of his of my spend is in that, and 33% is in that for James's dad. Whereas that means I've got 3.2 million less to be spent on midfielders and forwards. 64% of my total spend is on midfielders and forwards, whereas 67% for James's dad. In terms of midfield and defence, James's dad spends 24.3 million on defenders. I spent 26.6, and he spent 40 million on midfielders. I spent 36.2. Small exercise, but it's worth looking at just because it makes me wonder who's getting better value here. Probably James's dad. And that's reflected in, whether by hook or by crook, skill, luck, whatever, him being in the stratospheric rank and me not being there. Anyway, that's a lengthy setup, and thanks, James, for all that, as it helps us really get to the nub of the issue, which I think is how squad dynamics this year are simply just far more interesting than ever before, when we all had 8 or 9 of the same players. Even now, because you've got people with different transfer situations, people who have gone down different pathways, different routes, and as we said in our WhatsApp, Sam, the planning side this year is so engaging, and that's why we sort of love this year, even though we're actually doing badly on the pitch, like off the pitch, all the stuff that you can think about and all the stuff that, you know, could possibly happen going forward. Someone said to me at the start of the year that I've never seen you so impassioned about how something could be about changes to the game. I do think that it's really good because there's that scope for creativity, which we never had in the past, really. And I think that, you know, before FPL review properly spins up and becomes all encompassing, I do think that there is definitely gaps to find edges, I suppose. I mean, this is just an example of how you could possibly do that. But you sold Trent, so this is maybe a way that you can actually get there.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I mean, so far, congrats to James's dad, of course. Really good setup. And what's really interesting from on screen is it's not necessarily just the way the spend is split across defence, midfield, and up front. It's also that the spend is concentrated in very key pockets. So he's obviously got the 3 premiums, even got a 4.5 million midfielder in there in Dibbling, as well as 2 cheapy or relatively cheap midfielders alongside. So Garnacho and ESR up front, it's not that different either. He's got Antonio alongside Solanke. So it's not like he's saved money in 2 positions in defence and used that to get himself the 3rd premium. He's actually cut little bits of budget from the edges of his side, and sometimes even impacting his starting 11 as well. So as you can see, well, maybe as you can see if you're watching on YouTube, in every single week, you'd imagine he has to play one of Dibbling, Antonio, or a Keane or a Harwood Bellis, for instance, which obviously is fine, but it's not what we would maybe consider to be a well-balanced side. So you're kind of going into most weeks with that 11th man maybe being a little bit iffy, but that's iffy from our point of view, maybe from an outsider's point of view that maybe isn't listening to FPL podcasts every single week. They don't mind leaving the 11th man to someone that they can just like hope gets the appearance points and maybe gets the odd goal, the odd assist, and concentrate on the key positions with high upside, hoping that they more often than not repay those points and obviously add some extra. And so far it's working really, really well. The fact that he's managed to squeeze in Haaland, Salah and Palmer, the 3 most expensive assets, is quite impressive. And obviously they've gotten off to a great start as well. So this is obviously slightly outcome driven, and I'll come on to a few points on that later on. But yeah, great start. And it does look like more than ever so far, at least, that kind of losing your interest in that 11th or 12th man a little bit and piling the money into the 2 or 3 key positions, the key men that you desperately want every single week, is so far paying off and seems to be the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, of course this won't last, and of course, you know, people, the defense will at some point provide some semblance of consistency. We didn't see that last year with all the goals that were scored, but there were, you know, teams that did come through. So it's a decent bet that, you know, the likes of Arsenal, the likes of kind of Trent, will kind of eventually pay dividends. However, as you said, having that kind of the gumption, I suppose, to follow that strategy of going with 10 men effectively, and just piling that money into owning the correct players, as James said, correct in terms of the premiums for a reason. They're consistent. Having those talisman means that you've got that sort of sense of peace of mind, which I quite like. And I think that it kind of throughout the years there has been this sort of idea that having a balanced team is obviously the best way to go, and maybe it almost harks back to a older sort of period, doesn't it? Where you just kind of, apart from Leighton Baines, you just decimated the defense. You had 4.5s, 4.0s, and
Yeah.
just screwed it. All that money was in having Hazard, Salah, and Aguero in your side, and going back further, having Torres, Lampard, and Van Persie, etc., and so on and so on. And defense will come back eventually. Hopefully by then you'll have your wild card back, and things will be a little bit different. Over Christmas, the likes of Milenkovic and Dunk, who is injured at the moment, but will come back. Those big skull centre backs with the X minutes are going to be kind of really invaluable. But I don't mind at the moment thinking about it that way. And if we do, as we noted last week, see the trend continue into next year, where goals are the way that things are moving towards, and then maybe kind of all this investment in defence. You've got Trent as a proto Liverpool attacker. Is that working at the moment? Not really. And then the Arsenal defence obviously flattering to deceive hugely over the course of the last few weeks. Perhaps it is the time to be thinking, if you are kind of sat there on free transfers, to think, well, you know what, if I do own Trent, I do own Gabriel, maybe Gabriel is going to be a bit of a forced decision, then maybe it is the time to just think, you know what, I'm going to take those guys down, get Ait Nori in, get Milenkovic in, and then with that first transfer, hey, you know what, I can suddenly turn Morgan Rogers into Palmer. Brilliant, happy days. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, it's something I'm very interested in, not necessarily this game week, but in a couple of game weeks' time, when a lot of the premiums do have a nice little run of fixtures that you're going to probably want to own at least 2 premium midfielders, if not 3, for quite a while. So there are sacrifices that are going to need to be made. So yeah, in summary, I really like that idea at the moment. I think the crucial thing is, and it's been mentioned in the chat once or twice already as well, is this is, of course, very outcome driven so far. And we're only 9 game weeks into a very long season. So the question you have to ask yourself is, do you expect this trend, the trend of all of the premium assets, maybe bar Haaland at one very frustrating time, doing fairly consistently well, to continue at this rate? Meanwhile, the medium priced assets, those sort of your Arsenal defense, your Solankis up top, your Fodens as well in the middle, maybe your Luis Diaz, those kind of players that are around the 5 to 6 million in defense, the 7 to 9 million in midfield, or maybe the 7 to 9 million up front as well. Are they going to continue to play under their capabilities, or are they going to eventually come good? And I think with the Arsenal defense in particular, I would expect them to come good at some point. I'd also expect Trent to come good fairly soon, considering the data we've seen. And it seems likely that at some point there's going to be another 7.58 million midfielder other than Mbeumo that really puts their hand up and says, you know what, you kind of need me. Maybe that's going to be Bruno now that we've got a new Man United manager. You never know. Same goes for up front. So whilst that looks really good right now, I think it's important to still keep that open mind that if you do pile all of this money into just 3 players, in some cases 4, I've seen one team out there in the stratosphere with 4 premiums, you are so light in every other position that the second that the medium price players start consistently performing, which they are capable of doing, that could leave you with a pretty big decision to make. Now, again, you can always use one of those players as a cash cow to quickly get to those, but it can leave you a step behind. So it's basically just a question of, do you expect this trend to continue? And if so, how much faith do you have in it over the Christmas period where it will be a bit busy? Do you think that teams are going to continue to be this adventurous moving forwards and not really keeping the clean sheets, or do you expect tighter defenses around Christmas time? Quite possibly. So yeah, I think at the moment it all looks good and rosy, and I'm considering trying to get to a triple premium as well. But I am trying to keep an open mind with, like, basically just saying I don't want to cut off my route to some of those sub-premium options that just so far just haven't really done anything for us, but will inevitably come good at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here taking stock of what we know, effectively, like listening to what you say, which is that we knew that this kind of 4 game week block was going to be a difficult one, with a lot of the big teams who furnish our FPL teams playing each other a lot of the time,
Yeah.
having not as good fixtures, and then obviously Man City being off the boil. All of these things kind of conspire to throw in the focus on those edge pieces week after week. And, you know, we also are seeing slightly, I hate using the variance, but slightly unpredictable outcomes. So, I mean, I don't know what odds you'd have gotten on Mo Salah against Arsenal outscoring Erling Haaland against Southampton this week. I mean, that seems crazy. If I'd have said that to you last week as my bold claim, I think you'd have had to give me 10 points if I was right on that one. And you know, we're in a bit of a rocky period for FPL, which is ultimately always about owning the best players effectively and finding a way to kind of ensure that you have 3 or 4 players who are just consistent and building the team around them, those star men. And yes, you can go to the extreme like James's dad has done, as you said, with the formium, and yeah, that could pay dividends in situations. It's just the case of, if you're taking a long view, like we said earlier on, something like this isn't ultimately sustainable, I don't think. But it could be that the defense just doesn't recover and defense is kind of universally awful. I'm not sure I quite see that happening. I do think that we will see at least one team, as you saw last year, stick their hand up and just say, you know what, defense is fine. Maybe we've seen it with Nottingham Forest already, for example.
Yeah.
And you may also see, as you said, kind of that one player come through in the mid ranks. Nathan in the chat is saying, you know, Bowen's been a really good addition for him for the last few weeks, because yes, he's not done he's not kind of done loads really, but his ability to him being on penalties, him being the talisman, those sorts of things are just really important. So yeah, within this current situation, it could be kind of perhaps tempting to, as we were saying earlier on, just throw the baby out the bathwater, perhaps take a massive hit, like Ed FPL Rhinos was saying, and then just kind of revamp your team to sort yourself out and play a wild card through a masochistic hit. But I don't know, maybe it is worth sort of stepping back and thinking about the context a little bit of the situation that we're in. And as you were saying earlier on, Sam, just making sure that you aren't just kind of errantly throwing darts at a dartboard, and more just kind of making hay about the fact that it was always going to be a difficult period, and as long as you're able to kind of, I guess, plug the gaps and try to kind of just have a semblance of acceptance about the fact that, you know, some players that you do own, like the Arsenal defense or something like that, are going to eventually come good, then you're probably going to be okay. It's just going to be a bit of a bad kind of couple of weeks potentially, and you can just do potentially some things with moving the edge pieces around. Maybe that's a good way of looking at it. Maybe that's a bit of copium, perhaps, in terms of going forwards. I don't know. I mean, you've already sold Trent, and you've got Mo potentially also coming in. Is that as far as it will go? I mean, I suppose your decision may be made if Gabriel's injured as well. That might be where your kind of final free transfer goes, right?
Well, I've only got the one free transfer this week, so it's either I can use that to attack someone like a Salah, or I try and cover off injury issues potentially. I think at the moment I'm much preferring the Salah route, because I think there's just a much greater upside that can be gained from bringing in what I believe to be the best captaincy option this week than to mess around with players that I won't be captaining. And therefore, it's much less likely to gain significant upside. That being said, I am tempted to take a hit this week and perhaps may have to in the next few weeks. And I'm also pretty tempted to get rid of Haaland eventually, just because the longer we're going into this season, and again, this is nothing against Haaland's performance levels, 11 goals in 9 games. If someone had told me that going into the start of the season, there's no way I'd be going without him. But from what we've seen so far, if we remove the fact that he's got them in little batches and we imagine he got them at a consistent rate, I still don't know if, as long as the Salahs, the Sakas and the Palmers of the world are consistently enough performing, that Haaland is going to be good enough value in the long term for me to actually have him alongside 2 premium midfielders. I think it's just going to come as too much of a sacrifice elsewhere. And again, just going back to the original question here as to whether or not this sort of setup of 3, maybe even 4 premiums is sustainable. It's kind of only sustainable if all of the edge pieces are correct. And I think the cheaper the edge pieces, the less likely you are to nail them for a long period of time. So if you've got 3 premiums and 2 of those premiums are Haaland, who, again, we classify as a premium, but he's almost like a premium plus. It's an extra 2.5 million that if you had a 3 premium of Salah, Palmer and Saka, you're actually saving money in comparison that you can bolster elsewhere. I think those edge pieces become more and more problematic every single week, and you might be able to nail it for a little stretch, but the likelihood of those edge pieces consistently returning points, if you've piled more money into those 3 premiums, it's just quite unlikely. We're not going to see another Palmer come out of the woodwork at 5 million to help kind of complement the really beefy premium setup. Rodgers just isn't quite that good. He's decent at 5 million, but he's not going to get a return every week. Same with the strikers. I mean, you have to get that 6 million striker correct. And whilst it's being Wood right now, there will be times later on in the season where it's someone else and you might not have that someone else at the right moment. Same goes for 4.5 million defenders. So I think you're kind of just buying that extra security if you remove a little bit of money, and that being Haaland is a massive risk, but you can still have 3 premiums that way. You can have an extra 2.5 million to spend elsewhere to bolster the defense a little bit, to have a little bit of more security. And I think over a long period of time, that probably pays off as long as your Salahs, Sakas and Palmers continue at a similar rate to what they're doing at the moment. So I am tempted to get rid of Haaland fairly soon, but that doesn't have to be this week. And I still like him for the next 3 game weeks with the fixtures to come. So I'm trying to find a way to hold on to him probably until that little turn in game week 12, where some of the midfielders have incredible fixtures. And I think that's an opportunity for me to maybe go against the grain a little bit and maybe take that calculated risk I mentioned earlier on.
I mean, that's my final point on this, really, that the game week 12 will probably be a bit of a turning point for a lot of the players that James's dad and a lot of those sorts of teams miss. Because currently it's obviously suited them within the context of having poor fixtures for a lot of the big teams. But from game week 12, I think it does kind of turn the dime a little bit, and something you've got within that vault face, a lot of players who do something, again, seem very desirable. So yeah, a bit about kind of understanding that we're in a bit of a bad period, a bit about, as Sam was kind of alluding to earlier on, thinking about the long view and try and sort it out in a more sort of balanced and considered way. I think those are the ways in which we are going to try to sort this out. But hey, if you have been playing in a balanced way, you've had a wonkified team and you've smashed it recently, kudos to you. It's been absolutely brilliant. It's been an absolutely brilliant time. I don't know. I hope you fail soon. I hope that we but yeah, no, it's been it's going to be a bit of a tough period in the next couple of games. But I do think that, as I always say, the bigger the red arrow, the bigger the green coming up soon. Hey,
Yeah.
what we hold on. That's what we hold on to, Sam. Coming next week. Sam's not here anymore because he went from 2.7 million to 3.5 million and doesn't feel able to the pod this week.
My expertise will come into question eventually, I think. So yeah, have to try and regain a decent rank soon enough.
Are you saying that you're an expert?
No. Enthusiast. My enthusiasm will decrease if I get down to 4-5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll just be an FPL individual, right? Okay. The final thing, this of the kind of before we got into the preview is Man United under Ten Hag. After Ten Hag, and will the Red Devils be resurrected? It's 1-0. I should probably count on the season-long bold claims now. Because it's the first man to lose his job, and he's hairless. So that's 1-0 to me. This morning, Fabrizio Romano tweeted that they were having a meeting about Ten Hag's future. 3 minutes later, the news came out that he was sacked. So it was obviously
Short meeting.
A very short meeting, yes. They probably only got the cappuccinos in before they decided that it was all over. As we went to air, all of the United Twitter accounts seem to believe that Amormin from Sporting is basically a done deal. He's gone down to 1 to 5 on the betting market, so that does look like it's odds on. On Ten Hag, I'm sure none of you need reminding. United obviously incredibly disorganised. Jamie Carragher famously, rightly or wrongly, said they're the most poorly coached team in the league, incredibly inconsistent, as we all know. The greatest day was undoubtedly their FA Cup final, which probably provided the temporary stay of execution. But yeah, lots of damning stats and lots of damning losses, and simply a feeling he's been a dead man walking for a while, hence my bold claim. And the worst thing I did see this week was that Solskjaer apparently turned down Anthony at 30 million. Evan Ten Hag spent almost 90 million pounds on the player with less than 50 appearances for United. All of which throws United into the spotlight with a great run coming up in the short term. They've got Chelsea at home, but after that, they've got a really nice triad. Leicester at home, Ipswich away, and Everton at home. And, the new manager bounce, I suppose, is something that is thrown into focus for FPL managers. We spoke about this so much in the past. The kind of the availability heuristic salient one is obviously Oliver Glasner last year, the transformative effect he had on Palace assets and United themselves as well. When Solskjaer came in, suddenly the rejuvenation of players like Pogba comes to mind. So lots of questions kind of surrounding this out there. I don't think we're going to be able to do it too much justice, especially because they've got Chelsea, who are looking actually really, really competent coming up. Don't know who the manager's going to be. But yeah, there's definitely going to be, I suppose, the case that you've got loads of players who are distressed assets, FPL-wise, so cheaper than they were initially priced in most cases, although Dalot, Mazraoui are slightly 0.1 more than they started the season. But yeah, lots of potential within that team in terms of players that you could possibly pick up as we go forward if the new manager is positively transformative. I mean, Sam, in these instances, are you likely to be jumping in on these sorts of players, or are you going to be just kind of keeping, I suppose, a watchful eye on these individuals?
Yeah, watchful eye for me for now, mainly through necessity than anything else. Because I've only got the one free transfer, I've got more important things to sort out first. And also Chelsea is probably an opportunity to just watch and see how it all develops. Even if a manager isn't in situ at that moment, we'll probably see whether or not they're going to be rejuvenated by Ten Hag going. Now, we don't know exactly what the dressing room dynamics was under Ten Hag, but you'd imagine a weight will be lifted one way or another. A system change could also happen pretty quickly under a new manager. So from what it looks like, it could be a 5 at the back if Amorim comes in. That could also put Rashford centrally in a 2 up front. So I quite like the thought of that, and maybe he's been playing a little bit too wide under Ten Hag in the last season or so, and if he plays a bit more centrally, that could be interesting. It also throws into question potentially whether the likes of Rashford maybe, but also Garnacho, whether they get a regular starting spot in that system. And again, if they play with wing backs, someone like a Dalot could be interesting. All of this circles, of course, around Bruno Fernandes, who has good data, will be a leader, and will be expected to lead from the front under the new boss, almost certainly, no matter who it is. And I don't really mind it, even if it is a change of system and he plays perhaps a slightly more withdrawn role, we know what he can be like in that quarterback kind of deep playmaker role. He's very effective. So yeah, I think Man United assets 11 through to 13 could be really interesting. There's definitely points on the table there. Even if it was still under Ten Hag, it would have been an interesting run. The data hasn't been terrible from an attacking point of view, but certainly under a new coach, you'd imagine there is a bounce, and there might be an opportunity there if you can pick the player who's nailed on to start. The only one that I can really nail, or maybe one or two that you can really name and say they are definitely going to start under any new regime. Bruno, for sure, probably Dallo, and definitely Onana in goal. I don't think you'd necessarily go for the goalkeeper, but Dallo and Bruno could be interesting options for that little patch. And then when we've got any more certainty on Garnacho, Rashford even, then maybe we can look at them later on. But I think it'll be too soon come game week 11 to 13, unless, of course, you're already on them, which, of course, you are, Tom. And fingers crossed for you that Garnacho maintains his starting spot, because he has been good and the data is good as well. So it would be harsh to see him lose his spot now, in my opinion.
We need to see. Like, when I got the news today, I was pissed off on two counts. One, I was pissed off because if it is a more then he plays with wing back, so it probably means that Garnacho is a bit of a goner, and I've just brought him in, and so another question mark over a player in my team. And the second thing is that this was going to be all over the football news and all over Twitter for the next kind of 3 or 4 weeks.
Unless it gets sorted now, which it looks like it might.
Oh God, West Ham did not understand the assignment. You had to do enough to keep Ten Hag in the job. Don't get him sacked, because then United could potentially be better. No one wants that apart from United fans, but
Dallo clearly understood the assignment, though.
Oh, absolutely. Well, what a miss that was. But yeah, anyway, I mean, yeah, you've always got to be looking out in an FPL sense for these sort of talisman in waiting that stand to benefit, as you kind of mentioned. Like, there's always going to be players, and exemplified by Bruno Fernandes, who are going to be, in whatever happens next, and be part of the solution for the new manager. It could even be Rashford, who are going to be part of the solution for the new manager. And you do tend to see a short-term, at least, uplift whenever someone new comes in. In a club of United's stature, you're going to probably see somebody come in who is half competent. Obviously, we're all hoping it's going to be Southgate. But if it's not Southgate, then you're going to have to keep a keen eye on where the points can be coming from. I wouldn't be surprised, for example, if after the Chelsea game does kind of go past, and the new manager has come in, they look all right against Chelsea. It's probably going to be Van Nistelrooy, isn't it, with the new manager? If it is a more having a watching brief on Sunday, who knows? He might be in situ already, but you know how these things go, that people get very excited about something which is almost definitely happening. Like, I'm old enough to remember a few years ago that Jurrien Timber had signed for United, apparently, according to several prominent ITK accounts on Twitter. And yeah, that didn't happen, did it? So take it all with a pinch of salt. Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be one of those where over the course of the year, you will definitely see an impact. I think United, I vaguely think around kind of January, I think we said before, do end up having a really decent run. And they do have the buffers on that short-term run, as you can see if you're watching on YouTube, but just in general. So after the Everton game in 13, they then run into Arsenal away, Forest at home, and City away between 14 and 16. So any players that are brought in are going to have that sort of short-termism about them, and having a bit of a wait and watch is going to be quite good. I remember when Solskjaer came in, they then went on that sort of they had that sort of kind of 14 game run of really good fixtures, so it was absolutely fine to dive on a Pogba or dive on a Rashford. You're probably going to be all right. In this case, it's more of sort of measured consideration for me with owning Garnacho. I'm now a bit concerned if it is a more we'll see if that's the case. But yeah, I mean, it would be quite good, I think, given how cheap their players are, if a manager comes in who is competent, because that represents a really good opportunity for us as FPL managers effectively. I think that's kind of what I took from it, apart from kind of obviously being individually a bit annoyed that if it is a manager who plays with wing backs, then my particular asset is going to be at risk. Anything else to add on that?
No, I think that's summed up pretty well. At the moment, it is up in the air. We don't know for sure who the manager will be. It looks likely. And like you mentioned astutely, it's a pretty short period of fixtures that are decent. So if there's risk-taking managers with a few free transfers out there, then it makes sense to have a look between 11 and 13. But managers who are a little bit short on transfers and not really that happy taking a risk on Man United, considering how poor they've been the last couple of seasons, then it's completely understandable to just give them a watching brief and then come back to them later on in the season when we know what the new manager is going to be playing and who the assets to own will be later on down the line. So for me, they're a wait and see, but there might be risk-taking managers out there who like the upside in the short term.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever you go from known quantity to unknown quantity, things become a lot more opportunistic, really. And someone like Bruno, who, as I said in the past, I've kind of quite quit. Wasn't interested at the start of the season. Now I certainly am, depending on who the new manager is, because I think that could completely recast him in an FPL sense. Right, Gameweek preview, Sam. Quite a few things to go through. The knee-jerk, best transfers, bold claims, best captains as always, that top four. But in the knee-jerk, there's definitely something worth discussing, which is, have managers had enough of Haaland? I've definitely walked back from, get rid of him. He's pissed me off. This is the last time. He's failed me for the last time. But yeah, you can see that there's definitely been this, I suppose, climb down, I guess, from what the view was on Haaland in the past. He's not dominating the sales out. He's first at 50,000 sales out for Haaland. So it's not the case that people are kind of getting rid. But I obviously have seen a few people who have just gone, you know what, it's all over for me. I'm getting Salah in, selling Haaland, because there are kind of quite a few in my situation who can't do what you can do and get Salah in. I mean, is it time to get rid of Haaland now? If you are in that situation, Sam?
I'm going to say no. I think there are combinations which could work to get rid of Haaland this week, but ideally, if there's a route to keep him and also get to Salah, then that's obviously ideal. If you can't do Salah and Haaland at the same time, given your team structure, I think you probably just stick with what you've got. I don't think Haaland is that far behind Salah over the next 3 game weeks, considering the fixtures. And whilst on paper they look more difficult, they're still good fixtures for Haaland. Bournemouth, Brighton, Spurs, I think, in that order. Brighton and Spurs in particular, you can definitely see the matchup working in Man City's favour and Haaland's favour quite nicely there, especially now that Dunk is out for 3 to 4 game weeks, or 3 to 4 weeks even as well. So he could be a significant doubt for that match. And Spurs, well, we know exactly how Spurs play, and they are going to leave spaces in behind for him. So he's going to get points over the next 3. I think it would be very foolish to just say that based on what we've seen in the last 4 game weeks, he's just a busted flush and he's not going to get the points. The data, especially against Southampton, suggests that he's not a million miles away from the big hauls. It's just whether or not that value for money is there in the long term. And I do still have questions over that. And I think there are going to be opportunities to have a team without him in it that will pay off really well. And some of you out there might be very happy without him all season so far and doing very well without him. But these next 3 game weeks, I think if you've got him already, the matchup is still good. I certainly wouldn't be getting rid of him for a hit, which I've seen a lot of people, like in my comments on YouTube and stuff, asking me about as well. Definitely don't do that. Even though Salah looks like a great pick for the next 3, there are definitely universes where Haaland does outscore him. I personally think Salah does outscore Haaland, but it won't be by tons, and it could go either way. So I think if it's for free, I could maybe get on board with it, but you are opening yourself up to a lot of risk over the next 3 in particular. I think I personally wouldn't be selling him if I could in any way avoid it. I would try to hold on to him.
Yeah, I think I'm I'm definitely with you, because it's just, yeah. I mean, all you need to do is look at the betting markets. All you need to do is look at the quality of the player in terms of the online data, and if you've watched Haaland before, etc. Like, it's just ridiculous. I mean, obviously there was the emotional response to having the underwhelming outcome is what is informing a lot of this. I wouldn't be surprised, Sam, if a lot of people who are looking to sell Haaland are also people who triple captained him this week, to
Yeah,
be honest, and people who have come to the end of their tether. But I don't think he's ever underperformed his XG, has he?
I think he
So
very slightly did last season, or did for the majority, and then like got it all back in one game or something. So yeah,
right, okay, you might be right. I can't remember.
he
Maybe
ran
was
very
maybe.
close to it last year.
Yeah. No, I think he did. I think he might have, actually. So yeah, maybe it is the case that, no Rodri, no party. But it's one of those things that I'm not sure I want to take on. Ed in the chat has just said the next two fixtures might actually be quite good for Haaland, actually, in terms of opportunities. Like, we know what happens with, for example, captaining against Brighton, as we saw last year, in Gameweek 11. So I'm not too sure about that one. The other one, within staying in the same sort of area in terms of premium forwards, most expensive forward is Ollie Watkins.
Mm.
Quite a lot of sales for Watkins this week. I'm going to be keeping hold of him just because it is Spurs. But equally, you could say that you could point out that Spurs are actually 5th overall for XGC.
Yeah,
So maybe you might be thinking, well, actually, that's worth keeping hold of. So I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I've kind of had a very kind of tilty weekend, and it feels like to me that I'm going to just be leaving everything as it is for one more week before I kind of make decisions. I'm going to be very worried about not owning Salah, and I suspect I'm going to be punished for not owning Salah. But the rest of it, just kind of, I don't know, making decisions like selling Haaland, to a lesser extent selling Watkins, do feel a bit, I don't know. It feels a bit premature almost. It feels a bit like throwing the baby at the bathwater. But maybe that's just me in my new incarnation of a dull template FPL player, just having these sorts of schema about my about my decision making that maybe I shouldn't have anymore. I don't know.
yeah, I kind of agree with you on that. It feels perhaps like over managing to me, and the mistakes I've made so far this season have mainly been down to over managing. So I'm trying to consciously avoid those kind of issues. And like I say, I will reiterate, there will be moments this season where I will probably go without Haaland, maybe because I am chasing in part, but I don't think the next 3 are the weeks that I want to do it. Maybe by the time I get towards the end of that little patch, there's a route to a 3 premium midfield that I really like that requires me to get rid of Haaland at that point. But the next few, I don't really want to get rid of him. And I think that if other managers are getting rid of him, that presents the ones who hold him more of an opportunity to climb ranks, because he won't be captained as much. The EO will fall. And if you just hold on to him and he does get the hat tricks, which we know he's very much capable of, even in the hardest fixtures, but certainly against Bournemouth, Brighton, Tottenham, it can absolutely turn around. And it's only 4 or 5 weeks ago that we were saying that he's basically getting a hat trick every single week. How can you possibly go without him? So these things come and go in FPL very, very quickly, and you've got to look at the cards on the table right now. And I think the next few are too good to pass up on, really.
Yeah. And for me, Nate said in the chat that, obviously there's a huge case for owning Salah versus Brighton. I can't get that unless I sell Haaland for a hit. And it just feels like the risk reward isn't quite there this week.
Haaland plays them as well, though, right? So
yeah, I've made my bed and I've got to lie in it, unfortunately. For whatever happens next. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fine if you are kind of feeling that you want to grasp the nettle. If you've got 3, 4, 5 free transfers, then you're in a very different situation from me, and that's the beauty of this year. really, that you've got that kind of capacity to have those sort of thoughts and of moving a player like Haaland on, and then potentially kind of look to get him back later on, or just take him on for a little while. I mean, absolutely fine. And the next few fixtures, I think Bournemouth and Brighton, probably okay fixture for him. Spurs in 12, as you mentioned, Sam. 13, 14, Liverpool away, and then Forest at home. You probably won't be captaining for Liverpool at least. So there's definitely kind of ways around it. And maybe that's something that we need to kind of come back to really kind of later on in the season. I think, will we too insistent on this one player staying in our teams, but it's hard to do that right now, isn't it? Transfers this week, quite a lot going on there. A couple of players that we obviously need to discuss here. In terms of the overall market, you've got Bumo bought by almost 300,000 at the moment, Wood 200,000, Ike Nori 4.4 not very long ago, and now it's 4.5. Now 4.5. Gvardiol got a rise overnight to 6.2, was 5.9 not very long ago, and then Saka bought by loads of people. I'm sure who sold very recently, 125k. On the other side, Gabriel been sold by 135,000 managers. Not too surprising given the flag, and lots of the sort of armchair physio accounts on Twitter are saying that he's got an MCL injury. We may not see him again for a little while. Who knows? Gabriel Watkins sold by 100k. Son sold by 100k. Luis Diaz, I think he did definitely hit that sort of the apex of his value, I suppose, a few weeks back when he was 8.1, down 7.9 now, still being sold, and Jota as well being sold. I think we should probably zero in a couple of these players. So Calvert-Lewin, Nathan in the chat says he can't sell Calvert-Lewin for Southampton away. Sorry, Sam. But it's not been great. And I just wasn't interested in Calvert-Lewin at all. As I said to you, he's one of those players that I'm just like, you know what? A bit like Nunez. I'm just like, yeah, I'm very happy for other people to own him, but he's just not really been for me for a long time. That Ancelotti year aside, just not been a player that I've ever been particularly interested in. Underperforming again his XG, as to the surprise of nobody, especially you, Sam. I mean, what are you looking to do with him? Keep him for another week with the Saints fixture, or is this the time where you just nip it in the bud, as you were kind of slightly intimating you may do earlier on?
Yeah, well, so spoiler alert, I've already made my free transfer this week. So if I did this one, it would be for a hit. So it's basically just a question of how bad do I really think DCL is. At the moment, I think he's pretty bad. The problem is he's got Southampton next, and obviously that's a good fixture. A lot of it will come down to, do I think he keeps his starting spot this week? Obviously, Beto came off the bench, scored the equaliser after weeks of DCL underperformance. There's definitely a chance that he does miss the game and maybe get 10 minutes off the bench, which would be horrific for me. I'm considering especially all of the other forward options around the same price who are bagging goals for fun at the moment, with also very decent fixtures for the next few. I think if I am to sell him, it probably is for one of Cunha or for Wissa. Now, actually, Cunha I can't do, because of the first transfer I've made means I don't have the money in the bank to do so. So that probably leaves me with Wissa. Double Brentford looks good for the next few, but their fixtures do turn pretty soonish, I think in game week 13 or 14. So it is fairly short term, but I think the upside is there. It's just whether or not for a hit that pays off. But the data's great on Wissa, even without any sort of set pieces. I still think he's a much better pick than DCL. It's just, am I over managing by getting rid of a player who's about to play Southampton, likely to start, but maybe there is a risk he doesn't. But if he does, he's on penalties, and Southampton are pretty poor at the back. So yeah, at the moment, I think I'm slightly more on holding him, but I could easily pivot and just go for Wissa if I feel less confident of a start.
Yeah, Hedgie in the chat, she said that Everton's second favourite is for Southampton with the bookies. I mean, God, it's one of those players that you've got to leave for this game and then figure out later on, right? So you've got your one free transfer. It's the case that you kind of just deal with that next week almost. I mean, you probably might find a place that you can deal with it later on. Hindi Monkey's currently on a crusade against Calvert-Lewin, having again fallen for the trap. Sorry, Sam. But, it might not be a trap next week. Who knows?
Even if he scores next week, he was still a horrific trap. I hate myself for bringing him in. I will never do it again.
So many people like him versus Wood. You had the choice.
Or Jimenez, or Cunha, or like literally anyone.
Yeah. Gosh, it's not great, is it really? I think that Cunha is a player that I'm more than likely bringing in either this week or next. He's been like kind of nailed into the plan for an awfully long time. As the guy to get. And I think that I'm hoping he'll be the next Wood effectively. I think I'm going to probably give Watkins Spurs and then take it from there effectively. But yeah, it's very likely. I think that Aston Villa got Liverpool the week after, so I think that's the week where I'll be doing Watkins to Cunha. But yeah, he's definitely always coming from for me. Gabriel, if Gabriel is out, I suppose that both of us with Mikalenko will probably let him come in. But if you are looking to move him on, I suppose Guardiola is the obvious sort of way in. Or do we speak about what we were talking about earlier on in terms of just reinvesting that money further forward? So we've got the big skull centre backs like Milenkovic, whose good run is actually coming to an end now. Decent Christmas, decent-ish Christmas, I'd say. But I think that their kind of run of good fixtures kind of beget them having quite good outcomes, and whether their defensive performance is going to continue is kind of going to be measured by how well they do over the next few weeks when the fixtures do kind of tighten up a bit. Aït-Nouri is obviously where you may possibly go. Third goal in 4 games for Aït-Nouri. Maybe he'd be the one that you go to. I mean, if Gabriel is ruled out, Sam, and then I kind of think, I think I've got Aït-Nouri somewhere in my plan over the next few weeks. Maybe I just kind of go there now. Although Mikalenko is probably the decent pick against Southampton, who do seem a bit constipated when it comes to trying to score goals.
Yeah, I think if you've got Mikalenko on the bench, like we do, he just comes in. If Gabriel's out, that's absolutely fine. Arguably, you could even start him anyway, even if Gabriel is fit. I do like Aït-Nouri. The asterisk is against his name are he's on 4 yellows already. There's a long way to go before that gets sort of taken out of contention. So he will almost certainly get a 1-game ban in the next few. That doesn't actually put me off of him that much. I still think the upside is there and the fixtures are good enough that even if he misses 1 week, I think that will maybe prevent other managers going there. And I still think that overall it pays off at the price he's at. The other maybe slight issue is that Wolves might be now playing a more traditional back 4 rather than a wing back system where Aït-Nouri is a little bit more withdrawn after the second half against Brighton. Gary O'Neill did come out and say that he made a mistake tactically and that they might be playing 4 at the back from now on. I actually, again, just don't think that makes that much of a difference. I think systematically, O'Neill sees Aït-Nouri as one of their stronger attackers, and they will build the system to suit him getting forward, even if it is in a back 4. So whilst on paper that sounds pretty off-putting, the fixtures to come are good enough, and he's already gotten 5 attacking returns from some absolutely horrendous set of fixtures and good data. I just can't see a way it doesn't improve in terms of at least the data, even if the actual returns regress a little bit because he has massively overperformed. He would still be good value for money at 4.5. And again, even if he misses 1 game, I still think he's a good pick.
Yeah, I mean, with these edge pieces, I think the reality is that what I want is expected minutes over the course of the next few weeks. The other one that I may kind of pick up on, if you're able to use a Mikalenko, they've got Southampton and then they've got West Ham. And they've got a really horrible kind of quad from Gameweek 15. The other one that I may kind of bring to everyone's attention is Levi Colwill at Chelsea. They've got a really good run of fixtures from Gameweek 12, pretty much all the way until Gameweek 23. And they've got a settled team, settled defense. Obviously, they had a couple of players who did miss out recently due to suspension, but he'd be another player that I would be looking at. Wouldn't ever touch Reece James again with a barge pole. He would get
He's playing
injured
right
very,
centre
very
back
quickly.
anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not the Reece James that we saw for that small period not very long ago. I wouldn't be adverse at all to buying Levi Colwill. He's in my thoughts really actually going forward. I think he and Fofana, although
Yeah.
Fofana had that very long kind of injury layoff, do look kind of decent sort of pickups. But I don't know. I'm not really too interested in going for Guardiola now after the Southampton game's passed. Not really too interested in Porro, I'm afraid, Sam, just because Spurs, even though their defense data is good, don't seem to be able to keep a clean sheet. And yes, he's got loads of positives, routes to points, but it doesn't quite feel that that's good value for money right now, given how the defense is looking. I think maybe it's a bit late for a Pinnock or something like that. I don't. It's game week 14, I think it is that. That Brentford's games kind of run out being good, and maybe you would look at Dallo if you got the money in the bank. Honestly, maybe this is the time to do it if you can bench him this week, play Mikalenko, and kind of just have him there. And I mean, they've got Arsenal, Man City, and Liverpool coming up, but if you can kind of cover that within your team setup, it's not too bad. So yeah, lots of different ways to go possibly there. Bold claim, Sam. Yeah, 2-1 to me. Yeah, and it's not a good one. It's a happiness hedge. My happiness hedge was that Haaland is not going to be the top scoring City player versus Southampton. Yay! Draws. I mean, it's not really. It doesn't give me secure at all. It does not make me feel good. But hey, there we go. 2-1 to me. What do you do this week?
Well done, I guess. Arsenal clean sheet against Liverpool. Again, not necessarily hedging. I think the opposite. I was kind of like doubling down, considering I went double Arsenal defense as well. Obviously, did not happen, but I thought there was a chance that maybe we saw a really stodgy Arsenal performance, just trying to shut down everything, and it didn't really pan out that way. It was a really exciting end-to-end game in the end. So good for the neutrals. Not good for my bold claim. Still now 2-1 to you. And of course, you got your season-long bold claim as well, so that gets you more points. So yeah, I've got some catching up to do in bold claims as well.
Yep, and this week
I'm going for a classic 5 goals plus in the game that I think you got a bold claim off last season with this exact bet as well. So I went with Spurs Villa 5 goals. I really think this one will be a lovely end-to-end game. It should be classic Barclays, and I look forward to catching it. I'm not sure if it's on TV or not, but I need to find a way to watch it.
Yeah, no, it should be good. It is on Sky Sports because it's the 2 p.m. on Sunday. Yeah, I mean, I've got Rodgers and Watkins, so hopefully Rodgers off the bench when they inevitably play Duran and Watkins for this game. We'll do something, but yeah, hopefully Watkins does turn that a couple of weeks of decent XGI into actual goals, especially for that Bournemouth game. Mine is happiness hedging, Haaland hat-trick versus Bournemouth. I don't know if that's going to pass the Forest test. I think it probably will. I think that in terms of him being the likeliest goal scorer, yeah, okay, that would not be. If I said Haaland to score versus Bournemouth, you'd laugh me out of the room. But basically, only
hat-trick is always bold.
A hat-trick plus will do. That's all that will do. So I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, definitely. That a hat trick is always bold. Like,
do I believe that's going to happen? Yeah, he's my captain this week. But yeah, other than that, who knows? Right. Okay. On to the teams for this week.
You're first up.
Know what I'm going to do. Yeah, first up. Don't know what I'm going to do. I said to you the other day, I haven't rolled a chance since game week 2. Didn't expect to do that within the context of this. Oh yeah, you know what? If you roll, it's obviously net good. And I was saying earlier in the season, pre-season actually, that there's so much value now about rolling the transfer. What have I done? Every week I've made a move. Every week I've been chasing the upside. maybe, especially because I was on tilt last week, this is the time, especially because I can't get Salah this week without a hit, and also including selling Haaland. This is the time to just kind of think, you know what, actually, let's just take a step back and just let it be for a minute. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. I've got in mind to do Watkins to Cunha for the Saints game in game week 11. So maybe this week I just roll the transfer, see what happens. If Gabriel is out, I think I just kind of keep it calm, play Mikalenko. I don't know if I'm going to play Davis. I mean, they're going to concede, aren't they? So
I'd play
I'm going to.
Davis.
I know they're going. He's going to. You know what? His XGI has obviously been great, ish, over the last few weeks. But he's going to need two returns to make that worthwhile because they're going to concede at least 2 goals. That's just what Ipswich seems to be doing this year. And they're this year's Luton, as the Garden Football Weekly were kind of saying. They just lose heroically every week. In FPL terms, that could be good, you know, if Davis does score a free kick or something like that. But realistically, you're probably looking at Everton probably keeping a clean sheet against Southampton. But in terms of the probabilities, that's kind of where that's going to go. So I probably would do that. Or no, I don't know. I can maybe content myself that that's the one thing that I worry about or think about this week as being.
Yeah, that's a nice problem to have
in my mind. But yeah, I think any kind of transfer that I make this week does have to be a hit, and it does kind of have to prioritize Salah. Basically, it's a high behind the sofa for that Liverpool Brighton 3 p.m. on Saturday. Yeah, it's inevitable that I think I'm going to get a big downturn. So I'm just hoping that something does go my way elsewhere. But yeah, I don't know. I'm in that state at the moment where I'm resigned to a bit of red arrow this week. You've made a transfer already, as you've kind of trailed. What was it, and what are you doing?
Yeah, so Foden is gone. Salah is in. Easy, sorted. Thank you very much. End of pod. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so Salah, yeah, straight in. I love the next 3. It was an opportunity that was way too good to pass up, and I had 0.1 spare to do it. I am very fed up of losing little bits of value here and there, and given Salah's fitness record, I thought it's worth going early on. I don't want to lose out on extra value, or perhaps even get priced out of it later on in the week if things really go against me. Nothing against Foden's performance against Southampton. It was fine. Obviously unlucky not to get anything from the data, but I have come to the realization that I'm overcomplicating things quite often in FPL at the moment, and Foden is a minutes risk at times. He's not on many set pieces. He's on some, but he's certainly not on penalties. He's certainly not a talisman, and he's not getting barely any XG data so far from what we've seen. Haaland, of course, being the big chance hoover, whereas Salah is the complete opposite. He's on penalties. He gets 90 minutes. Absolutely locked in down that right-hand side, talismanic, got better fixtures over the next 3, maybe just, and certainly a good captainable asset in 2 of the 3 weeks, if not all 3. And not everyone's going to be able to go there. So it seemed like an opportunity that was just way too good to pass up on. Yeah, look, there are issues in my side for sure. Calvert-Lewin, Solanke, both big issues that I'm worried about, but they probably get this game week, especially if I think Calvert-Lewin starts. Solanke, I think, is just staying in from the virtue that he's got the Ipswich game coming next week that I'm hoping is just reverts all of the XG that he's been missing out on over the last few. Backline, I think Mikalenko just comes in for Gabriel, and I start with Lewis, Porro and Mikalenko. Raya obviously in goal. And yeah, outside of that, I'm not super excited about this game week, but I don't think it's absolutely horrific. Certainly scared of Palmer though.
Yeah, that's the big miss for you, and for me, the big miss is Salah. It's just if Palmer blanks versus United, then I'm screwed, and vice versa. Really,
yeah.
Which I don't think is very likely. Let's face it.
Knowing my luck.
Oh God, let's not talk about luck anymore. Variance, God.
Knowing my variance, that doesn't quite ring the same, does it?
Useless. Let's just hope the FPL review spins up soon and can save us both from our own incompetence. Cool. I think that's basically everything. Very cathartic, Sam. Thanks so much for that. I feel a lot better. And I'm looking forward now to next week, where I'm inevitably going to get more punishment, aren't I? Let's face it.
Yeah, we both are, but that's what we're here for. And it's always fun to listen to two co-hosts suffering along in FPL. Hopefully, if you've been watching along and you've had a bit of a tough time of it so far this season, this has been cathartic and you've enjoyed it. In the meantime, thank you all so much for listening. We were Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL, myself at FPL Pricey, on Instagram or Threads at WGTA.FPL. Again, just FPL Pricey on there. And if you did enjoy the pod today, please do consider following us on those social channels. But also, if you could give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, or of course, if you're watching along on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe to the channel. You won't miss out on any future content, and it really helps us out.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Sam. I hope you enjoyed the pod. Hope we assist you think about how you're going to sort it out if you're doing badly, and if you are doing well. Well, I hope it ends soon, so we do well. No, I'm kidding. All the best, everybody, this week, and speak to you very, very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?